So this guy, his name is Yiran. He is NIO's head of PR from 2018 to 2019. Here he is next to the CEO and co-founder. He doesn't work for NIO anymore. He has his own EV consulting firm, and he has a lot of inside knowledge about NIO and also the industry in general. If you guys understand Chinese, I highly recommend you go over to his channel and watch his video. This video is actually just going to be a translation plus a little bit of context for everything he talked about. I got the big notebook. You know how much information there is when you got to pull out the notebook, man. So once again, this is his opinion. None of this is financial advice, obviously. And I think it's very important for NIO investors to stay informed and see what's coming, all right? It's very important to see this coming and you can, hey, dodge it, right? Instead of this happening and you're like, what the hell just happened? So we don't like surprises. And this is gonna look forward and help you avoid any surprises. So that's awesome. So the first thing he said, in 2022, the first half, it was a good year. And then the second half, we saw things start to cool down. And the cooling may last for a very, very long time. And he personally expects double-digit percentage decline, aka negative growth, double-digit negative growth for the year of 2023 for the entire industry. And in his 10 plus years of working in the automobile industry, this next year is going to be a very rare year. So why is it so terrifying? There's several points he talked about. First one is real estate. All right, a lot of wealth is tied up in real estate, especially in China, about 70% or so. And real estate has been declining for the past 2 years. For the past 20 years, actually, real estate has just been unstoppable here in China. It's been a 20-year-old bull market bubble. And for the last 2 years, prices start declining. The Chinese people really have thought of real estate as the guaranteed investment that is guaranteed to appreciate in value over time, but that's clearly not the case, and this has served as a wake-up call. In 2023, people are finally going to realize that real estate is a risky investment, just like stocks, just like other investments, and it's not a guaranteed return. And we're seeing real estate prices start to drop, and as a result, family wealth also drops. As people's net worth and liquidity decreases, the consumer confidence will also decrease along with it. Next, he talked about subsidies for EVs in general. Now, before we had local subsidies, provincial subsidies, national subsidies, and also you got like tax incentives as well. We're going to see this slowly go away, and it's actually like already going away. And he talked about how he bought an ET5, and here is a list of the subsidies he got. He got the Shanghai EV license plate conversion subsidy for 10K. So that's converting from a gasoline plate to a EV plate. So that he saved 10K on his purchase from that. There's a 20K RMB Shanghai EV subsidy. So that's just to encourage people to buy EVs. And then an 11K RMB national EV subsidy. So that's also just the 国家补贴, which is like just, nationwide. And then there's also no purchase tax for EVs. So he saved around 70 to 80K RMB on a car that cost 370K. So it was a really good no-brainer deal for him. But we're going to see these subsidies slowly go away. And in fact, national subsidies is already gone. Well, that's point number 2. Point number 3, if you look at supply, last year, the year before that, we had chip shortages. And in the first half of 2022, you got a good balance of supply and demand, but near the end of 2022, we have seen an abundance of supply, and demand has already been fulfilled, and there's excess supply. So we're seeing that happen. Number 4, the shift away from zero COVID policy, one policy to the next policy. There will always be pain for at least one quarter. If you look at Taiwan, Singapore, what happened there. So we can expect Q1 and Q2 to see economic pain. Spending habits and car sales will decrease along with that. So there's always at least a quarter of pain whenever there's a transition between this policy. And also, they kind of went a little bit too quickly. People were complaining how they didn't have time to prepare, right? It was all of a sudden, hey, we're zero COVID, and then all of a sudden, hey, everybody's free to go wherever you want. People couldn't prepare themselves and get medicine, so there's going to be economic pain. So expect that to happen. And then number 5, he talked about population. So this is a very interesting point. 20% less people born into the 1990s compared to the 1980s due to one-child policy. And right now, the people in the 1990s are approaching 30 years old, right? And these are going to become the primary consumers of the next couple of years. And just having less population means less consumers in general. So all these added together is why he expects double-digit declines. Now, he went into more detail. For example, supply. There was an interesting question. Isn't cars like NIO's made to order? So he said you have to look at wait times. So he ordered, on top of ordering a NIO ET5, he also ordered a Model Y back in February, and he got delivery in June. So the wait time was around 4 months. But he said if you order it today, you can get it within a month. And that's basically also true. And that's the same with NIO, BYD, Zeekr as well. There is just an abundance of supply. And even talking to the NIO sales reps, there are a ton of already produced vehicles, so ready to go vehicles. And the sales reps told me you can get any vehicle just like that because they have lots of pre-built ones, except for the ET5. ET5, you still have to wait. So what's going on with this? Sometimes people place orders, but then when it comes to delivery, for several reasons, they might not have the money. Financing might be denied, etc. They can't take delivery of the car, and this ends up being one of those pre-built vehicles that doesn't have an owner. So it's a new car, but no customer for that car. So there's a lot of those, and you can just pick one up right away. So he said at the start of the year, most dealerships, etc., had like 1 month of supply, but now we've seen that stack up to 3 months of supply at dealerships. So 1/6, right, of the year's supply just jam-packed in there. So 15% of the sales are gone. So how will this impact the consumer? So overall, consumers will most likely choose to play it safe. They will choose bigger brands, and those very niche brands of car makers might get wiped out or bought out. Now, one example he talked about was how the Japanese car company Prince was founded during a hot auto market, but when it cooled and things got tough, they could barely survive. They were dying out. Nissan bought it, rebranded it as the Nissan GTR. So that's how that was born. So this will happen as well for these automakers here in China. The smaller ones might die off, the niche ones might get bought up, etc., etc. And then consumers will also tend to pick smaller, more energy, fuel efficient, economic cars, just like how in the US when times are good, people buy pickup trucks and big cars, but when times are tough, people buy Japanese, more cheap Japanese cars. So there's the argument, even if the economy is bad, the rich will still be rich. And he said this is only half correct because dollar-wise, the rich actually suffer a much bigger loss than the poor. As a result, their allowance or the amount of money they allocated to purchasing a car might also decrease along with that. So they might be looking to buy a $1 million car before that, 1 million RMB, but now their budget might only be like 500K. It's not going to stop rich people from buying cars, but they might be more conservative with their budget. So he expects the entire auto market to slide downhill. So he said 2 of the price categories of cars that will suffer the most. The first one is the 200K mainstream cars. So these are the mid-high spec mainstream cars like the Volkswagen Passat, the Camry, the Link CO1, the Netta S. So he said during economic downturn, their budget, consumers' budget might be cut by 30%, right? They might remove 30% off their budget. So instead, they might look for something like the BYD Chin Plus or the ID3. These are very good alternatives that people will most likely just buy instead of those. The other price category that is going to really suffer is the cars, the EVs that are under 100K RMB. Things like the Wuling Mini, the Kiwi EV, the Lu Mini. These consumers might just give up the purchase altogether and choose instead public transportation and save on that money. So next he talked about, what about NIO Xpeng Li Auto plus BYD? Well, he talked about how in the past couple of years they were charging forward and seeing 100% year-on-year growth. It's like a high-speed train going forward, but as the market is cooling, they need to slow down. Right? They need to slow down and be more cost efficient. But many of these companies will be stubborn and think that they are special. This doesn't affect them, etc., etc., only to realize later on, maybe in Q1 or Q2, that things aren't going too well, and then they start hitting on the brakes. But by then, it might be too late because the supply chain is very long. It's very hard to like control everything and slow everything down, every part of the supply chain. It'll take a while before they can actually, braking takes effect for the manufacturing process. So as a result, he predicts that we will see massive discounts and price wars. And he's talking about how the BMW 1 Series right now goes for 140k RMB, for Beamer. 2-3 years ago, for that price, you could only buy a Corolla. And now the Corolla starts at 70k RMB. So the discounts are already pretty crazy, right? And he said it will get even crazier in 2023, these price war, and we'll see a price war like we've never seen before. One good example that I'm seeing right now is the new BMW i3. This is actually a sedan, and it's priced at the same price as an ET5, 350k, but because of oversupply, right now they're going for 100k RMB discount. So that's almost like 30% off, which is pretty insane. So you can pick up a BMW i3 for as low as 240k RMB. So that's just a massive, massive discount. And it shows the magnitude of the oversupply that we have right now. And he also talked about how a friend in Shanghai has a company that sells used luxury cars, secondhand ones, M4s, 911s. And he's also talking about how they're also oversupplied and he has to cut prices severely and they're barely surviving. So the question was asked, is it bad to invest in EV stocks? And he said, no comment on that. But if winter's coming, it's not a bad idea to put on a coat. It's not a bad idea to throw away what you don't need to keep your hands warm. He said he personally has 5 EVs. He's already sold one and then also sold some of his expensive housing investments and cleared out his debt. So he has no debt. So he talked about how an important thing is for companies to balance production and sales. For example, one really good point he made is we don't see a lot of price cuts with Lexus in China, and it's because Lexus in China constantly balances demand and sales. So if there's 150k demand, they will only import 150k cars. Whereas for other cars, if there's 150k demand, they'll plan production for 250k ahead of time. And then when the production comes, they're oversupplied. And first of all, this has nothing to do with the car being bad or the sales not working hard. It's just oversupplied. And they end up having to give out a discount for these cars. So that's just what's happening. Companies really need to plan out the production conservatively. And then he talked about how many companies, EV companies, can consider lowering prices intelligently and smartly. And one of the he gave a few examples, including NIO. But first, he talked about how the ID4, which he owns, is a great car. We're already seeing 10k plus deliveries per month with that car itself. And he said if you replace the expensive ternary lithium battery with the lithium iron phosphate battery, which we're already seeing in BYD and Teslas, they can easily double deliveries because you can save about 20% of the cost of the car by using this new LFP batteries. And if you pass on those to the consumer, that's just an insane deal. So he talked about how the ET5 NIO is persistent with always having dual motors because they don't want, if one motor fails, there's also another one as a backup. But he talked about during this economic condition, it's wise to consider maybe reducing the motors, maybe removing LiDAR, maybe removing the free swaps, and then you can get the price down 50k. And then for that price, imagine the sales that NIO will get. It's just crazy. So NIO has a lot of car types, right? And all of this is to satisfy each consumer and what they want, their preferences. But the main goal is, of course, to to increase sales and improve sales. They can consider and should absolutely consider these methods of reducing the price of the car. And one important thing, especially when it comes to all this LiDAR stuff, he talked about how EVs in China overuse too much hardware and they pile on too much hardware, like this autonomous driving hardware. LiDARs, however many sensors, however many millimeter wave sensors, etc., etc. And is it really that good to put on that many sensors? Is it really honorable? In his words, is it really honorable, right? If you think about it in another way, if you need a ton of sensors to get the job done, doesn't that mean your tech might not be that advanced? That your tech is actually behind because you need more sensors to do the same job? But more importantly, these are huge costs that are passed on to the consumer. The tech proficient dude might care about, you know, all these sensors and all this tech, and they might be able to see the actual differences, but many regular people might not. And forcing all this extra hardware and cost onto the consumer might not really be worth it. It might be irresponsible, considering consumers' experience of using the car, and also monetary wise. If you can buy a 200K car for 180 car, man, people will be super happy about that. He talked about how the 70K Toyota 11 has L2 standard on all models, and compared to others, right, like the NIOs, etc., their autonomous driving might be better than the 11, but by how much, right? The tech proficient dude, as he is, he'd say about 30%. But he talked about how the regular people wouldn't even be able to tell. Like his father couldn't even tell the difference. It's the same thing. Autonomous driving is progressing at a snail's pace. And for this to pile on a ton of hardware, jacking up the prices, is very irresponsible for the customer. For example, right now, all the NT 2.0 cars, they have LiDAR, the NIO ES7, the NIO ET7, the NIO ET5, but it's still not available to customers, right? So they've all paid for this expensive hardware and they don't get to use it. Wouldn't it be a smart idea if they came out with a version of the ET5 without this LiDAR? Because to be honest, not many people will use it. It's also hidden behind a paywall. You got to pay for NAD monthly. It's debatable how many people will actually pay for that. So if you remove the LiDAR and make it single motor, rear wheel drive, and cut the price down, that will tremendously boost sales. I did warn you guys of demand. The NIO manager warned you guys of demand. Then the NIO CEO came and confirmed everything I said and warned about demand. The NIO CEO warns about demand. And this guy, he's also sort of warning about sales in 2023. For me personally, I think this EV subsidy cut is very, very big blow, a gut punch to the EV industry in general. I think we're going to see margin compression within 2023 for NIO stock in particular, and also earnings recession. So earnings are not going to look that great, but I'll explain that in a future video. So yeah, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Everything I tell you has been the truth and nothing but the truth, right hand to God. So it's important to stay informed. Stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out.